Walking. We all know it's good for us, but how many steps do we really need each day? You might know that the much repeated 10,000 steps was based on marketing, but the research tells a different story. And for women over 50, the numbers are more forgiving and more specific. I'm Ruth, retired doctor turned health coach and nutritionist. And in this video, I'll go through 4 large studies to find the step count where meaningful benefits begin, the optimum number of steps for good health, and what happens with chronic disease when you walk. By the end, you'll have a target you can trust and tips for a clear path to reach and optimize it. I decided to make this video following a story on the news last weekend. Early next year, the NHS will run a scheme rewarding people who walk 30 minutes a day. So steps mean points and points mean prizes. What prizes? Well, no one knows. Perhaps a GP appointment within 2 weeks. I'm joking. But is 30 minutes enough? And exactly how many steps do we need? Well, we'll investigate, and as ever, I'm giving you my sources so you can go and read the papers if you want. But before we run through the science, and so we're all on the same page, let's quickly address that 10,000 claim and why we can safely ignore it. In 1965, a Japanese company called Yamasa Clock launched a pedometer called Manpo Kai, which means 10,000 step meter. Well, allegedly, if you speak Japanese and this isn't true, then please let me know. So why 10,000? Well, apparently because the Japanese character for 10,000 looks like someone walking. Which it kind of does if you walk with your arms out to your side at a jaunty angle and a spring in your step. So there were no clinical trials and no data to back it up. But the number spread globally because the product sold and it seemed like a good idea at the time. Soon, 10,000 steps became the target to hit and the number to which we all held ourselves accountable. But this number was set by a marketing team. The research tells a different story and the bar is lower than you think. Let's look at the first study because it specifically studied older women and it showed that the health benefits started at under 10,000 steps and quite a lot under. It was by Lee and colleagues, published in 2019. It tracked 16,741 women over the age of 45 over 4 years, and it looked at all-cause mortality, so dying from any cause. Women were split into quarters based on how many steps they did. So women averaging 4,000 steps a day had a significantly lower chance of dying than those in the lowest quarter who averaged 2,700 steps. And the benefits didn't stop there. They kept rising with step count. So the more steps, the bigger the decrease in mortality. And this is called dose response. But only up to a point, the effects plateaued at 7,000 steps, and beyond 7,000 there was no extra benefit to walking further. So even at just 4,000 steps, so well under half the target we've all been chasing, there was already a meaningful difference in mortality. And the benefits topped out at 7,000, not the 10 we'd all assumed we needed. But one study is one study, and does this result hold out across a bigger and more varied group of adults? Well, yes, it does, but it depends on your age. So Palak and colleagues published a meta-analysis in 2022 in the Lancet Public Health. Remember, a meta-analysis is a study combining the results of lots of other studies. And in terms of medical evidence, it sits at the top of the tree. They pooled the data from 15 studies, which was a whopping 47,471 adults. Again, they looked at the relationship between step count and mortality across the group. The research showed the same pattern, so the mortality benefit rises with the number of steps taken and then plateaus. But crucially, they found that the plateau point varied with age. So in adults under 60, the benefits flattened out between 8 and 10,000 steps. For adults over 60, it was 6 to 8,000. And again, beyond this, there was no significant further reduction in mortality. So yes, the pattern holds in a large group of adults and remains below 10,000, even with the suggestion that younger adults should walk a little further. So if you've ever felt disappointed in yourself for not hitting 10,000, stop right now. And if you're finding this video useful, heck, even mildly entertaining, you might like my weekly newsletter for women over 50 who want to age healthily. I'll put the link to sign up in the description below. So now we know where the ceiling is, but what about the floor? So what's the lowest number of steps you need to see benefit? Because that would be really nice to know if you're currently sedentary and starting from scratch. Stenz and co-authors looked at exactly that in 2023. And the number where benefits start surprised me because it's way lower than I expected. So this was another meta-analysis, and they looked at both all-cause mortality and the incidence of diseases of the heart and circulation, so cardiovascular disease. There was an 11% reduction in the incidence of cardiovascular disease at 2,735 steps, and an 8% reduction in all-cause mortality at just 2,517 steps. So a risk reduction at numbers that are pretty easy to obtain through just day-to-day movement. The dose-response relationship, well, that still holds. The mortality benefit plateaued at 8,763 steps, and the heart disease benefit plateaued earlier at 7,126 steps. So consistent with the previous two studies, the sweet spot still lies in the 7,000 to 9,000 range. But the key takeaway from this paper is that if you're currently sedentary, even a short daily walk of around 3,000 to 4,000 steps is going to be beneficial. So far, the studies have looked at mortality, so dying before your time, or heart disease. This last paper from Ding and colleagues, again published in Lancet Public Health in 2025, widened the lens, and what it found makes the case for 7,000 steps even more compelling. They found that compared with 2,000 steps, 7,000 led to reductions in the incidence of heart disease, type 2 diabetes, falls and depression. There was no significant difference found in the incidence of cancer, so developing cancer, which makes perfect sense as there are many causes of cancer, including sadly just bad luck. But there was a reduction in dying from cancer. Again, there was limited additional benefit once you go above 7,000. Now, I do need to mention an important caveat here. All of these studies were observational, tracking cohorts of people over time. Now, that's a perfectly valid study design, but it can only ever reveal associations, not direct cause. And the studies could suffer from something called reverse causality, which is a type of bias. It says that rather than reduced walking causing people to get sick, the relationship is the other way round, and people who are already sick don't tend to walk as far as healthy people. But given that we're looking at long-term health effects, this is the only type of study we can really do. And in all the studies, the authors do try to statistically control for bias. And the results of this final study are compelling given the number of participants. 7,000 steps seems to protect against the very things we all want to avoid as we age. The conditions that lead to a loss of independence and health. And that changes your motivation for lacing up your shoes and getting outside. So now we've got some specific numbers. If you've got a chronic injury or illness and walking is a challenge, a modest 3,000 to 4,000 steps will be beneficial. As I like to say, anything is better than sitting on the sofa, and in reality, this is a short walk each day combined with your normal day-to-day movement. The sweet spot for most of us is 7,000 steps. Now, this is good news as it's much more achievable than 10,000. And those of us with the time and energy can, of course, go further. But beyond around 9,000 steps, there isn't much extra health benefit in terms of chronic disease and mortality. Now, you will, of course, burn more calories, and if you enjoy it, then go for it. But the key point of this video is that if reaching 10,000 causes you a bit of stress and guilt, then relax because it's not necessary. So taking that optimum number of 7,000, if we go back to that NHS scheme, 30 minutes walking at moderate pace will clock up around 3 to 3,500 steps, which is halfway there. Now, I love walking. I walk daily, come rain or shine, as I've got a dog, Jerry, our miniature poodle. And I track my steps using an Aura ring, so my hand is looking uncharacteristically girly, but you can easily use your phone. And if you aren't currently hitting 7,000 and you don't own a dog, here's some tips for getting there. Don't jump straight to 7,000, add steps in incrementally week by week. Schedule walks rather than leave them to chance. The same time each day reduces friction and makes it more likely to happen. A morning walk is particularly useful. It gets it done before the day gets in the way, and morning light helps to set your body clock, which is a bonus. Short walks, well, they count too, so 3 10-minute walks obviously adds up to 30 and absolutely counts. So before and after your working day, and a short walk at lunch will get you there. So set a plan that gets you to 7,000 and keeps you there, built on small, scheduled increases week by week, and you'll make that habit stick. And if you are hitting 7,000 consistently, there's a couple of ways to get more out of your walk, and it doesn't have to mean adding in more time. And yes, we should all be doing other types of exercise too, including strength, but this is a video about walking, so we're sticking with it. Now, I'm often asked by clients if walking counts as cardio, and the answer is yes, it can. It all comes down to how hard you're working. You want to move away from a comfortable stroll into something called Zone 2. Zone 2 is a low to moderate intensity steady exercise. It builds endurance and it burns fat. You can check you're there with a wearable, but you can also use the talk test. In Zone 2, you should be able to hold a conversation. If you can sing, you're not working hard enough, and if you can't get a sentence out, you've gone too far. It should be conversational but effortful. The body adapts to exercise with time, so if you're hitting Zone 2 on all your walks, try adding in some intervals. Either speed intervals where you intermittently pick up your pace and get out of breath, or add in some hills, which also helps to build leg and glute strength. I like to walk Jerry up a big hill in a local country park 4 mornings a week. It gets my heart pumping, there's a nice view from the top, and Jerry usually pulls me into the cafe afterwards for a latte. If I look at my stats from my 48-minute walk this morning, I spent most of it in Zone 2 and a smaller amount in the higher zones as I went up the hilly bits and my pulse went up. You can also add in a weighted vest to increase the amount of work that you do. Just stick to the expert's advice of less than 10% of your body weight and check with your doctor or physiotherapist if you have osteoporosis or spine problems. So your 7,000 steps gets you out of the door. The intensity and incline are what keeps challenging you. And if you want to know why a weighted vest will help with cardio but does nothing useful for bone density, then watch this video next.